Hi there, and welcome to this introduction on animal welfare ethics and One Welfare. My name is Kimberly Wells. I'm the Senior Manager, Global Animal Welfare at Brook Action for Working Horses and Donkeys. Today, I'll be speaking to you about what animal welfare is, animal ethics, as well as how you can appraise animal welfare risk within your work. I'll then be passing over to my colleague, Samantha. Sam is a veterinary surgeon and project manager with Kenda. She'll be talking more about animal health, welfare, and how that links with human health and nutrition. And finally, I'll pass over to Rebecca Doyle. She's an animal welfare scientist at the International Livestock Research Institute, and she'll be covering the topics of One Welfare movement, as well as the emerging concept of One Welfare. So how people view animals and use animals varies greatly around the world. There are different attitudes and beliefs that feature along a spectrum. There's a belief that animals should be free from human use and exploitation of people, a belief that animals are used but should be done so with respect to their welfare, and a belief that animals can be used as and how we like. Those who hold the belief that animals are not for human use align more with an animal rights belief. Those who hold the belief that animals can be used but should be with respect to their welfare align more with animal welfare beliefs. Here we have the World Organization for Animal Health, or the OIE's definition of animal welfare, and the learnings of the factors that affect animal welfare from being good, bad, or somewhere in between. Cases where individuals intentionally or even unintentionally harm or neglect animals are defined as cases of animal cruelty, abuse, or neglect. And according to the Humane Society, cases like these cross all social and economic boundaries. But animal welfare is an exciting professional discipline and increasingly becoming the responsibility of everyone. So the One Health movement, the emerging concept of One Welfare, and the progress towards us achieving our sustainable development goals further champion this testament. Animal welfare science is the scientific study of animals in different contexts in which we find them. Animal welfare ethics seeks to determine how animals should be treated, drawing on multiple streams of information to reach a moral judgment. And legislation defines how animals must be treated in law. This will vary from country to country and between different types of animals, such as pets, livestock, and those used for scientific research. But there's an increasingly growing body of scientific evidence that demonstrates that animals are sentient. And by this, I mean they have the ability to experience negative feelings such as pain, fear, and frustration, as well as to experience positive, enjoyable feelings such as comfort, contentment, play, and things like that. Science contributes to the way that people think about animals, as does education, social, and cultural factors. And on this basis, we make decisions about what we should do. In May 2021, it was reported that animals are to be recognized formally as sentient beings in UK law for the first time. So to me, sentience is a great example of where science, ethics, and law come together. So there are frameworks out there to help define, understand, and then additionally appraise and assess animals' welfare. And this all supports the current thinking that animals are sentient, that welfare encompasses physical, emotional, and natural components that change due to multiple influences, and that animals have the capacity to suffer on account of negative physical and emotional states, but also benefit and enjoy from positive experiences. So frameworks, most of them out there, do consider these key elements of health, nutrition, environment, behavior, and mental states. They guide us as to what provisions are required in order to minimize negative experiences and promote positive. So under health, for example, if our aim is to minimize thirst and hunger and enable eating to be a pleasurable experience, we need to think about how we can provide fresh access to food and water, as well as a suitable diet. Under behavior, if our aim is to minimize threats and unpleasant restrictions on behavior and provide rewarding opportunities for the animals, we need to think about how we can provide sufficient space, proper facilities, company of other animals, and appropriately varied conditions for the species that we're working with. And now more than ever, the world is making greater connections on the linkages between animals, people, and the environment. With the type of research you conduct, you too may be becoming increasingly aware of these linkages. The World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So you can see it's no longer just the absence of disease. And the key is that we should now aim to achieve the same in animals. This here further emphasizes the shift in mindset that's occurred, where minimizing negative experiences and promoting positive opportunities in human and animals is the way forward. So I mentioned frameworks. The 5 domains is the most comprehensive and up-to-date animal welfare framework. It can be useful in your research, where animals are directly or indirectly involved. One of the most important strengths of this model in particular is that it's not about merely reducing negative experiences, but again, thinking about what we need to do for animals to result in positive welfare. So to have good welfare, animals need both. The first 4 domains focus on the factors that give rise to specific negative or positive experiences, and these in turn affect the animal's mental state, which is the 5th domain. I'll put you at ease. The welfare of an animal can never be perfect, and again, the same is likely true for human welfare. The aim at Brook, as with many others, is to shift the balance to more positive welfare experiences than negative. And we believe that incorporating many small changes into their lives can have a big effect on their welfare in the daily and also in the longer term. As researchers, animals may be involved directly or indirectly in your work. There may be scenarios where you'll need to consider, identify, and mitigate risks to animals. To help you with this, I'd like to share the definitions of the 3 R's and categories of risks we use at Brook. The principles of replacement, reduction, and refinement were developed over 60 years ago, providing a framework for more humane research involving animals. And since then, these principles have been embedded nationally and internationally. So here you can see the definition of the 3 R's, where again, you're looking at alternatives to using animals at all, looking to minimize the number of animals involved in your research to get strong results, and to think about ways where suffering is minimized and positive opportunities are provided. So at Brook, we also believe in doing no harm. So to help us live up to this ethos, we do consider, identify, and mitigate risks in our work, including research. We can ask ourselves if the planned work will contribute to any of the following categories of risk. We then take decisions to minimize or eliminate the risk before the work commences, or not to proceed with an activity. So again, to put you at ease, risks don't mean don't do. It's about having an awareness of what animals will experience in the process and coming up with an informed judgment about what to do or not do. So this reflection on risk brings us back nicely to the definition of animal welfare. Animal welfare is the physical and mental state of an animal. And again, it's affected by lots of different factors. Advances in our scientific understanding of animals, along with many other things, defines our view of how animals should be treated and how they must be treated according to law. This article, What is Ethics in Research and Why is it Important?, which is featured on the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, suggests several reasons why it's important to adhere to ethical norms in research. It proposes a set of ethical principles for researchers, of which animal care is one. So we look forward to discussing this and more at our Learning Lab session later this month.
Why is animal welfare important to human health and nutrition? On this slide, we see that animal welfare affects human livelihoods, human health, project outcomes, and sustainable development. By ensuring that animals are healthy and well, it means people's livelihoods and livelihood needs are being met. For production animals, it means that they're growing and producing well, and for working animals, it means they're fit and healthy for work. The series of slides that we'll show will give examples as how animal welfare has an impact on these four areas. On the image on the left is our goats feeding in an arid area. Normally, during drought or dry spells, feed is usually scarce. When feed is scarce, it means that the animal owners are unable to keep their goat's body condition throughout the drought. When they have challenges of getting access to feed for themselves, they are required to sell they're required to sell their goods to markets to get income. By selling goods of low body condition, they get low market prices, and this impacts on their livelihoods. The image on the right shows dairy cattle being fed for improved and increased milk production. Studies have shown that any feed or contamination of animal feed leads to contamination of the animal products produced. A study in Kenya showed that by feeding the dairy cattle on aflatoxin um, feed, aflatoxin contaminated feed, that the milk that was produced also had traces of aflatoxin that exceeded the European Union legal limits of aflatoxin. This means that the human health is put at risk when they have animals that are fed on contaminated feed. As we look at the environment that we keep our animals, it is important to note that by having animals kept in environments that are not clean or dirty, it has a negative impact on their health and behavior. The image shows that these cattle are in a boma that has a lot of feces, which means they are not able to sit and rest as they would prefer in their normal behavior. Additionally, the dirt in the area means that these cattle are predisposed to frequent cases of mastitis. Mastitis would mean that the animals need to be treated regularly, and the humans who depend on the milk produced would not be able to access it or would consume milk that has antibiotics in it. Looking at the environment, animals are to be kept in clean shelters and away from direct sunlight and rain, which would predispose them to sickness. Animals in areas that are not dry tend to have hoof conditions and mastitis, which affects their working abilities and their production ability as well. As we look at the health of our animals, working animals need favorable conditions, which looks at the harnessing equipment which is used to enable them to work. The image on the right shows donkey that is wounded due to poor harnessing. These wounds predispose the donkeys to diseases such as tetanus, which when they do occur, leads to death, as most of the cases are detected quite late by the owners. This means that the lifespan of our donkeys goes down, and the people who rely on the donkeys to transport goods such as milk, as shown in the image, tend to lose their source of income or would have to rely on more expensive means of transportation. The image on the left shows a donkey with overgrown hooves. Overgrown hooves also have issues lead to issues of lameness in the donkeys, and that reduces their lifespan. This means that animal owners who rely on donkeys have Animal owners who rely on donkeys would require to purchase new donkeys more often, and the cost keeps going up and their incomes and poverty level goes down. Still looking at the health of the animals, this is an example of a disease outbreak that occurred in Kenya. The disease is Rift Valley fever, which occurs in animals. This disease is also zoonotic, which means it can be transmitted to humans. in the news clip shown, high rainfall resulted into the occurrence of Rift Valley fever disease in goats and cattle, which had not been vaccinated prior to the onset of the rains. This led to animal owners who interact closely with these animals being exposed to the disease. At the time of reporting this disease, a total of 6 people had died from the disease, and over 20 had been hospitalized. This means that by ensuring that the animal's health is catered for and that the animals are well vaccinated and treated prior to onsets of disease, then the humans are not likely to be exposed to these zoonotic diseases. The next slide shows animals being transported to the market. These are chickens that are squeezed and carried up, hanging upside down on the way to the market. The animal's mental state is usually a state of distress and anxiety as they head over to the market. During transportation, the chicken are usually get broken limbs, and some die on the way. As a result, the animal owners experience losses in terms of broken limbs and poor quality of chicken that are sold at the market. This in turn affects their overall livelihood. The image shows equines supporting their humans to collect relief food for the humans and for other livestock. During these disasters, animal health is usually compromised and sometimes forgotten in relief efforts. That is why the Livestock and Emergency Guidelines and Standards was developed to ensure that even during times of disaster, that the livestock's need in terms of feed and veterinary care is considered and put in place together with human relief efforts. Animal welfare is also important for project outcomes. Animals growing, functioning, and behaving well will lead to the predicted project outcomes. Better animal welfare will potentially improve project results, and the indicators will be important in reporting and publication of project outcomes. Overall, it is important to note that animal welfare contributes to 12 out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. By improving the welfare of the animals that we have, we are able to ensure that the communities we work with are able to access food for themselves, quality healthcare and education for their children from the incomes they have from the good welfare of their animals, and they're able to engage themselves in other activities that will improve their overall quality of life.
Thanks, Sam. So I'd like to talk about 2 frameworks that can also be helpful to help us understand the importance of good animal welfare to our projects and to us. The first one is One Health. One Health recognises the key links between human health, animal health, and ecosystem health. I'm sure it's a framework that everyone's very familiar with. The second framework is One Welfare, and that serves to highlight the interconnectedness between animal welfare, human well-being, and the environment. Both are really useful frameworks for us to use because One Health covers the fundamental need for health as a component of animal welfare. You know that your own welfare isn't good if you're not healthy and you don't have your health. But One Welfare is also a really important framework for us to consider because even if you are healthy and growing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have good welfare. And so that's why One Welfare provides extra evidence of the interconnectedness and importance of animal welfare, human well-being, and the environment. Sam has given lots of examples of the other components of animal welfare and how that relates to benefits to human well-being as well. Next slide, thanks. So One Health is a very popular concept now. It's moved beyond a concept actually, and the OIE describes it as being a global movement. One of the key examples of One Health is antimicrobial resistance or antimicrobial stewardship. This is an issue of global significance, and it clearly demonstrates this three-way relationship between people, the environment, and animals. With an estimated 700,000 people every year dying from antimicrobial resistance, the importance of having good antimicrobial practices in animal production is really clear as a part of this One Health movement. Next slide, please. This diagram here has lots of examples of the One welfare relationship and how animal welfare, human wellbeing, and the environment connects. It's a lot to take in at the moment, but I would recommend going back and having a look at it later, or having a look at the book that it comes from if you'd like to learn more about it. But it really helps to show examples of this 2- and 3-way relationship between those three components of One welfare. Next slide, please. So I'd like to share a couple of specific project examples of the interaction of One welfare between those three components. This here is an example of how a project aimed at improving rangeland management and capacity of veterinary workers and the community can have benefits to people's livelihoods, the environment itself in the rangeland, and improving animal welfare. The text to the sides of the circles helps to show those 2-way relationships. So, for example, healthier and more productive livestock is going to have a benefit, is going to enhance livelihood opportunities for the communities. At the same time, improved capacity for the communities, including the veterinary support services, is going to be able to help improve the care provided to livestock. And so this is therefore going to have that circular benefit back to improved and more productive livestock. And these other relationships exist between, as demonstrated on the slide, between people and the environment, and between the environment and the animals as well. Next slide, please. This is an example of some of the comments that people give, people that own livestock give when we ask them about what their role is in caring for livestock and how important livestock is to them. These quotes come from a project that ILRI is running in Ethiopia, where we're talking with the communities about their understanding of animal welfare and what animal welfare means to them. And you can see that from these two quotes describing humans as the God for animals, and that animals have similar needs and feelings to humans, that the people that own and care for their livestock really see the ability of those animals to experience all of the different components of animal welfare that Sam described before, as well as the fact that they have an obligation to care for their animals, and that will be a reciprocal relationship. Next slide, thanks. And then finally, this is an example of One welfare at work in a project that the University of Melbourne has in Pakistan. We have, in the villages that we work, a high mortality of young animals. And we have a project underway where we're strategically feeding those animals small amounts of food to improve their likelihood of survival and their growth. We're having some good successes with this, and this is having benefits then because you have more animals alive for less resources being input. So it has that environmental sustainability component to it potentially. But the other thing that we're doing is evaluating the impact of this feeding program on all members of the household, because women have different roles compared to men and compared to children. And we need to make sure that any intervention we're putting on, any intervention we're introducing is not adversely impacting even one member of the household, because if it is, it's not going to be sustainable. And so these are just a few examples of how we use that One welfare framework in our research to try and assess the benefits, but also make sure no one's specifically being disadvantaged. I'm going to hand back to Kate.
So we'll now show you a short video that illustrates this concept of One Health and One Welfare, and how we can take that approach to brick kiln work in the countries in which Brooke works. Approximately 150,000 brick kilns in Asia employ 4 million people and 500,000 animals to make 86% of the world's bricks. As demand for infrastructure increases, so does demand for brick. The work is dangerous, the environment hazardous, and the industry is unregulated and exploited. Animals and people work for long hours in the hot sun. Every family member will have a role to play. Often, the donkeys are tied up each night to prevent them straying, meaning they never get a chance to move freely and to choose when to eat or drink. Families rely on the income to buy food and send their children to school. If a donkey becomes injured or dies, they might not have money to replace it. To truly improve the health and welfare of animals working in these kilns, we must find a way to support and improve the lives of their owners and the state of the environment they work in. Employing a one health and one welfare approach can make a lasting change for people, animals, and the environment. In 2018, Brooke formed a coalition of organisations dedicated to better labour, animal health and welfare, child labour, conservation, and environmental health respectively. We don't want to stop these animals being used for livelihoods and nutrition, but we do have a duty of care to protect them. Protecting their welfare also helps protect our own.